Hello everyone, and welcome to the lecture on what is media literacy. For this lecture, please be sure that you've watched both videos that were posted so that you have the context for this lecture. The purpose of the lecture will be to distill down the main talking points from the video and to take those and apply them to our course. So it's important that you've watched those two videos before beginning this lecture. So you probably noticed in the videos that he talks very quickly through a lot of dense information. The purpose of those videos beyond our class is to give people an idea about media literacy in general. So he's covering a lot of information very quickly, and there are multiple videos in the series that we won't be watching. I've pulled those two in particular because they have the most relevance to our overall study of composition. And I'm going to take the lecture this week and focus you more narrowly on specific terms and translate those from the general video that you watched into the way that they're going to function in our class. So I want to start with his definition. He talked about media literacy as the ability to access, analyze, evaluate, create, and act using all forms of communication. That definition is applied very broadly to media, all forms of media. And we're not going to be looking at all forms this semester. Remember, we're focusing on popular culture media, and that's quite a bit different than general media. And some of his examples are taken from the news media, which we're not really analyzing this semester. But those same media skills can be developed, and I hope you will develop them to apply to all media that you encounter in your life. But we're going to be looking more specifically about how to use these 5 different terms within the form of popular culture. And then we're going to take those skills and our ability to apply them to popular culture, and we're going to write about the results of doing some of that analysis. So let's be a little more specific here with some of his terms and apply them to our class. First, I want us to think about a couple of terms that were introduced in the videos, encoding and decoding. You'll remember that in the video he described this through the use of a text message example where there was some confusion about where to go eat at a restaurant. So that's one form of encoding and decoding, and I want us to think about how that works with popular culture as well. So remember that you, as a consumer, aren't just absorbing messages from the general media and from popular culture without decoding them as you go. So remember, encoding is that a creator is going to make a message and send it out into the world and to you as a consumer. Decoding is you receiving that message, processing it, and deciding whether to accept it or reject it. The most obvious form of that would be in terms of advertising, where a message is encoded trying to sell you a product and you're decoding it, deciding whether or not you want to purchase that product. But it really happens in all sorts of media, as he explained in the video. So you do have an individual, personal process of interpretation that is used when interacting with any form of media. And that's what makes some forms of messages more successful with different people, because you're using different tools to decode these messages, and that makes them more or less effective for you as on a personal level. You're constantly making choices about which messages to receive and which ones to discard. And really, that's the reason for developing these media skills, is because the sheer amount of media makes it hard to comb through all of it, especially when some sources can be unreliable. So when we're practicing these media skills that we're going to be learning on the next couple of slides, keep in mind that the reason we're doing that is so that we can better understand how messages are encoded and what our own strategies are for decoding them. Essentially, it's like learning to read, right? Encoded words, each word carries a particular meaning behind it, and we have to decode the language in order to understand those different meanings. What we're doing is applying that same process more broadly to lots of different types of media, whether that's an advertisement, song lyrics, album art, a video game character, and on through popular culture. I took the media skills that are listed in the video, those 5 things: access, analyze, evaluate, create, and act. And what I've done is translate those into terms that will help us in our study of popular culture and composition this semester. So the next few slides are going to ask a lot of questions. We're not going to answer every question in this lecture. What the purpose of these questions are is to create a list for you to come back to throughout the course of the semester so that you can use these questions as guides as you do some media analysis and eventually as you're finding sources for your research and developing ideas for your essays this semester. So what I've done here is list out the first 5 in short form, and then the next couple of slides will go into a little bit more detail for each one, giving more in-depth examples. So point number 1 is access. What kind of content are you absorbing and how did you get it? That's the basic point of access. So for popular culture, you should ask, what are your sources of popular culture? How did you find these sources? For number 2, analyze. Are you making sense of the content's messages? For popular culture, do you think critically about popular culture media? Does it make sense to you? And there will be times, particularly as popular culture changes so quickly, where maybe older messages don't make sense anymore, or really new messages don't make sense because you don't have those popular culture reference points yet. So analysis becomes one of those key media skills that we're going to return to over and over. Number 3, evaluate. Were you aware that each message was created by someone with their own goals and opinions? Do you consider that popular culture is shaped by creators that are trying to influence you? That's another big point for popular culture, and one of the things that we want to develop is a sense of scrutiny of the types of popular culture that you're consuming and what those particular purposes are for its creation. Number 4, create. In this sense, creating your own popular culture products. When you create media, what is your responsibility to those who view it? Do you ever create your own popular culture media? You may do so this semester for this class, even if you don't do so regularly. And part of that responsibility is thinking about how it's going to affect your audience. And finally, number 5, act. What do you do with all the information you receive? Does popular culture make you act in the real world? Most often, do you spend money on it? Popular culture is a lot of times tied to products that are asking for your money, particularly through music, video games, and film, sometimes also with TV shows. And a lot of times those popular culture items become popular and desirable because of trendy things that are happening or that bring that sense of universal community bonding. In that case, you might want to demonstrate your participation in those popular culture forms through purchasing something. So how does the media and the popular culture impact your actual actions in the real world? And we'll talk more about that in just a moment too. Now we're going to take these 5 different media skills that we've listed out on the previous slide, and we're going to go into even more detail with sets of questions underneath each one. What I'm going to do is give you the general questions that were listed in the videos, and then I'm also going to take those and translate them further with pop culture examples, particularly through the media of music for this particular example. So the first one is access. In general, the question of access has to do with how you access things like the actual internet, hardware, software, and how you might have access to money to purchase these things. The video reminds us that digital skills are connected to success, and access is key to developing those skills. So you have to ask questions like, how did I get access, or how do I get access? Do I have it at home? Do I have to travel to campus or to a library in order to get internet access? Who has the most access, and who lacks access, and why? So questions of access help us to understand what's at stake in terms of the media reaching and communicating to people. For popular culture and within our class, We can ask questions like, how is music released to the public? Who controls its release? Who can afford to make music? And who can afford to buy it? So questions of access then are a way for us to begin thinking more critically about popular culture and how it impacts our life through just being able to access it. Number 2, analyze. Often there's too much information. So how do we pick what to focus on? The lecture says all media is constructed with a purpose and a particular point of view. In composition studies, we also emphasize this through the creation of texts, and we're going to be looking at how we practice analysis through different means, particularly through the rhetorical triangle. How do we break things down in order to understand the way that texts are affecting us? For our purposes here with popular culture, I want you to think through these questions that the video introduces you, but again, to take them and put them, for this example, through the lens of music media in particular. So if we're analyzing something, we might ask, who created this message and what is the purpose of it? In this sense, for music and popular culture, we would be thinking, well, an artist, a music artist created this message, or a producer created this particular song, a songwriter. The purpose might be entertainment value, but also, of course, to make money. What techniques does it use to attract and hold attention? In this case, we'd look more specifically at the actual product, lyrics, rhythm, videos related to the music, concerts that are being produced to sell that music, remixes that are coming out to remind you of that original music and to get you to continue to play it. So different techniques involve anything from the actual product to the entertainment industry surrounding that product. Holding your attention, making sure you haven't forgotten it, and continuing to ask you to participate in it. What lifestyles, values, and points of view does it depict? Often this is specific for our music example to the genre of music or the artist's image. So that lifestyle, value, and point of view is going to be quite different in something like country music to classical music to rock or to rap and R&B. So there are a lot of different values that are there embedded in the actual product and expectations of what those points of view and lifestyles would be based on the genre. So that can vary quite a bit. And you can see that in lots of different popular culture forms, that when people participate in certain ones, they're affirming that those are the values that they ascribe to. How might different people interpret the message? So in this case, if we're talking about music, this is going to come down to personal taste. Sometimes lyrics and different things might be really specific, and so a lot of people will interpret them the same way. Some are going to be left more open-ended, where there's a lot of subjective debate about what an artist might have meant by particular lyrics, and people will bring their own decoding strategies, as we mentioned before, to the task of interpreting what an artist might have meant. A lot of times, music artists and artists in general will leave things more open-ended because they want to appeal to a lot of different people and a lot of different tastes, and that leaves room for people to interpret things the way they want to. And then finally, what is omitted or left out of a particular message? So if you think that something should be included and it's not, that might actually be an intentional strategy on the part of the creator. And why would they want to leave something out? What does that silence mean? So you have to also think about what's not being said as well as what's being said. So all of these questions function to help develop the skill of analysis. And this can be applied to general media, to popular culture, and as we'll see in composition studies, many of these questions actually overlap with how we analyze texts as well. And I mean text here in terms of written text as well as visual texts. And we'll discuss that in detail as we go this semester. Number 3, evaluate. After you answer the analyze questions, you can evaluate the quality and credibility of the media you are consuming by asking even more questions. So some of the evaluate questions will be more useful when we begin discussing research sources rather than the actual material of popular culture. So I haven't followed through the music example with this one because these are more relevant when you're thinking in terms of source material, finding sources that comment on the popular culture media rather than the popular culture media itself. So here's some questions that you can ask that help evaluate. Relevance. Does the information or the media serve its purpose, and to what degree? So how related to the topic is the actual source that you're looking at? So if I wanted to write about music, I might go find a music review of a particular album. And I'm not going to choose one that isn't relevant or doesn't relate to the actual topic that I'm writing about. Accuracy. Check how factual the source is. Is it based on empirical claims or is it based on opinion? You should double check it against other sources. Don't assume that one source is true just because it's convenient to believe that it's true. Meaning, is it easy to believe? Well, okay, then I accept that it's accurate. It may not actually be accurate. You need to seek out the truth even when it might go against your personal opinion. So perhaps you like a particular album and you've come across a BuzzFeed article that says 100% of critics agree that this album is great. It would be very easy to say, well, I like that album, so this article must be true. You actually have to make sure that it's accurate by checking other sources to really see if 100% of critics are agreeing that that album is true. It might just be that that album is very popular, but that particular source wanted to portray it as being even more popular and used a sort of clickbait headline in order to do so. So you'd have to double check, even though it might not be as popular as you think it is. Even if it goes against your personal opinion, you still want to find the truth and make sure that what you're reporting about that album is actually accurate. Bias. Does the author slant the facts toward a particular point of view? Does the publication, company, or creator have a reason to present facts from only one perspective? Does the author or company profit in some way from not presenting the whole situation? So bias is one of those things that's related to accuracy as well. You want to make sure that the facts are right, and you want to make sure also that any facts that are being presented are the whole picture and not slanted in some way that benefits the person who's creating that source or that piece of media. So looking for bias is something that will align with accuracy, because as you're reading multiple sources and looking for lots of different opinions, then you'll be able to see a fuller picture rather than just gathering sources from one particular point of view. Reliability. This is also related to bias. How trustworthy is the author or company based on the entire history of their work? So you would want to find sources that had a lot of clout rather than new sources that might not have as much established credibility. So you can think about, in terms of music, you might go to a source like Rolling Stone because they have a long history as a magazine publishing about the music industry. You wouldn't necessarily want to use someone's blog that was just created in 2016 because while they've been writing for maybe 3 years or more, they don't actually necessarily have the established history that a larger publication would have. So looking for sources that are reliable as you talk about your popular culture topics will help you in terms of making sure that you're evaluating them properly. Usually, answering these above questions here will help you know whether it's reliable overall. So the example used in the video is about news, but even with our different focus, you can apply this same process. And it's very similar to how we're going to be conducting research on our topics, and hopefully these questions will return to them and they'll help you find some good sources to use. The last two media skills rely less on asking questions because you're actually acting in the real world. So number 4 is create. Make your own media and understand why it works. Examples include social media posts, blogs, GIF creation, in our case, creating pop culture artifacts and writing about them. So creating your own media relies on understanding the previous questions about access, analysis, and evaluation, so that way you understand what you are creating and how it has an effect on an audience. Number 5, act. This is doing something in the real world. Rather than just consuming media, it's actual activities and actions that affect reality. So real world actions based on what you learn from interacting with different media. Where you spend your money and where you spend your time are the two most prominent actions that come from social media interactions and popular culture interactions as well. So in conclusion, I want you to be able to return to these different media skills and their various questions throughout the course of the semester. And you'll be thinking through how to apply these questions and answer these questions as we create some of our projects this semester. You can really begin your analysis and your development of your media skills by using our course materials. For example, notice the way that pop culture appears in the videos that we watched. There's a Marilyn Monroe poster in the background behind the speaker. There's a Harry Potter book on the desk, and I'm sure you noticed the frequent references to the movie Titanic. So developing those media skills includes not taking things like those for granted. You can ask questions like, why are those things included? What function do they perform? How are they encoding certain messages? Did you decode them as you were actually watching the video? Meaning, did you respond to them and notice them and process them and interpret them? And if so, how did you interpret them? Did they provide humor, pleasure? Did they give a sense of community? Could you relate to those things? And if not, why did those messages fail? So I'm not going to actually ask you to answer those questions right now, but I just want to show you the example of how you can begin to practice those media skills by not taking the representation of popular culture for granted in anything that we're doing this semester. And I hope you'll begin to also develop those skills by thinking about what popular culture products you're consuming on a daily basis and begin to analyze and interpret those and think about how the messages that they are sending are being received by you, which ones you accept, which ones you reject, and how you participate in them overall. So keep these questions in mind as we begin to focus more on analysis and how these media skills are going to translate to composition. Thanks.